master's degree from MIT in computer science. But my first job at the company was working on the Macintosh, and that was really a surprise for me because I had tried to interview at Apple. I tried to get a job at Apple working on the Macintosh, but they gave me a job in another group, and so I took the job with Microsoft because I really liked microcomputers, and I knew about Microsoft since I was in high school, and then when I got to Microsoft, they had me sign a non-disclosure agreement, and then they opened my office to show me I had a Macintosh in my office, and I was going to work on the Microsoft Chart, which was the charting program we shipped with the first Macintosh. Yeah, I joined the Excel team after I finished working on Chart, and we shipped Chart. There were two of us working on that first product, and both of us moved over to the Excel team, and we integrated the charting functionality from that program into Excel. And I also then started working on Lotus 1-2-3 file compatibility. That was kind of my main thing I did with that first version of Excel. That was all my code. The way the Excel team was organized, we had what we called feature teams, and they were like groups of 3 or 4 developers working together on sets of features. And so I had a team that was responsible for kind of programmability and adding to new programming languages that you could use in Excel, and so I was the feature team lead for the next several versions, up through Excel 4. Mm-hmm. I think, so my situation was maybe a little different than some of the other Excel people, because after we shipped the Mac Excel product, most of the team went to work on Windows, and that was going to be the first Windows 2 version of Excel, which was going to be called Excel 2. And but they needed someone to stay behind and work on Macintosh stuff, so I had a small team at first. I think we were like 4 of us, and that grew to about 6. But we worked on Arabic Excel, Japanese Excel, and we did a lot of the translation. You needed special support for those languages in particular, as opposed to other European languages, which were much more easily localized from the original code. So I was working on it, when I was 23, 24 maybe, and but a lot of us were, several of us came from MIT, so we had a lot of education and had been programming computers for quite a long time.
Geeks.
Geeks. I'm really proud that I've been, in my small little way, I've been able to have an impact on, hundreds and hundreds of millions of people, probably, more than 1 billion people. Well, the first developer on Excel, the key architect of Excel. He designed intelligent recalc, and he was the primary developer from the beginning. But he left the company for about 6 months. He quit in disgust at the decision to move Excel to a Macintosh instead of, he wanted it to be on the PC. And so he quit, but...
To be firmer.
Well, he's very eccentric, a very independent person, and he decided he likes hiking around, and so he became a migrant farm laborer. He had a backpack, and he would go out to a farm and say, "You want me to help pick lettuce?" But his backpack was stolen, and so in the emergency, he called back to Jay at Microsoft and got him to send him a bus ticket, I think, to get back to Seattle. Yeah, Jay Blumenthal was then really close with Doug, and He was originally hired into a marketing position, and but he became Microsoft's first program manager. And this was a job that didn't exist before at Microsoft, but he was basically the person there to help the developers do all the tasks that we had been ordinarily doing by ourselves, like deciding what the functionality would be, what the spec would be, kind of working with, in detail, like how things should work. So the program manager could write a specification, and they could write down the way everything's supposed to work, and also communicate that with the documentation people. So they had to have all the information so they could write the reference manual for Excel. So he took on that job, and but I would say Doug and Jay together kind of are the key people who co-designed that first version of Excel. Yeah, Jeff Harbers was kind of our first manager of the group, and he was a little bit older, maybe 5 years older than the rest of us, and he had had experience working in industry, and so he was the one managing the group, and but he was also side by side writing code with us, and he was a really good manager, sometimes a little bit tough, but he unfortunately passed away much later on, and in fact, it was about 20 years. So we've been celebrating every Excel anniversary every 10 years, and at we had a 20-year anniversary where Jeff was there, but he died the next year. Bob Matthews, he worked on parts of Excel, and I'm not exactly sure which parts he worked on. He later headed up the whole Windows team, so he became the Windows manager for Windows. But he was kind of coming in and out of the project. We had several people who contributed some code to Excel, but then were working on other projects at the same time.
Yeah.
Steve Hazelrig was also one of the early Macintosh developers at Microsoft, and he was working on a program called Microsoft File, which was a database program before Microsoft Access existed. And when he finished File, he moved over to the Excel team, and then he was in charge of the printing support on Excel, and he invented Print Preview as a way for him to test his code very quickly. Ed was my first kind of, I was partnered with Ed. No, he wasn't really my manager, but we were partnered together working on Chart. So he did most of the charting work in that first version of Excel. John Partridge was the number 3 developer, I think, on Excel, and I'm trying to remember he worked on. A lot of other miscellaneous things. There were a lot of things with recalc and formulas and parsing, and I think he worked on a bunch of those things. But he did not stay at Microsoft after in fact he left just before Excel shipped. John Hopper was a tester, so he was the main tester for Excel. We had several testers. John was the primary one, but we also had Carol Gerbinski was a tester with him. Yeah, Lila she wasn't Partridge at the time. I forget her maiden name.
Yeah.
She and John, John got married actually. So, they were testing, and I think. They're also in that, there was a picture that we published inside the internal newsletter for Microsoft that has everyone doing anything to do with Excel as of May 2025, or May 1985. And there's more testers than those listed in here. Robin Budd, I think, was another one. So there were several people who were testing Excel at one point. Bill Bader, who changed his name to Bill Markman, but he is he was also working on different parts of Excel. It was kind of someone who was, I think, moving from one project to another, and so I don't think he was working as long on Excel as some of the rest of us were full-time on Excel, but I'm not exactly sure what things he was working on. Yeah, Rob Howe was also another tester on the team. Yes, I forgot about him. So Mark O'Brien was the second developer on Excel. He started working with Doug, and again, like Mark was the type of person who was very relentless. You could give him a problem, and he just would not let go of it. He would work on it really hard, and he was not able to come to our reunion recently, but he called in via a Zoom call. He lives in Massachusetts now, and he's still a Windows developer, so that's what he does. He has his own company. Yeah, Rick Powell was, I remember him mostly working on the macro language and things like that, but he might have other things he did. He later became the technical lead for Excel, and so he's a very mild-mannered, gentle person, and but he also had the long hair. We had a lot of people who looked like hippies in the group at the time, like Doug and Rick were like that. Brad Verheiden, we used to call him the human compiler. So his job was really taking like C code that was written to do things like calculations and translate it into 68,000 assembly language. So he was supposed to be like writing the really high performance code that we needed. Doug also wrote a lot of this, I think 68,000 assembly language as well, but Brad, that was mostly what he was doing. And then he left the Excel group after 1.0, and nobody knows what happened to him. I haven't found out where he is now. I haven't been able to get in touch with him. Mike Slade was he was the main guy for Excel marketing, and then he and Pete were at Stanford together, and then Pete started first. Pete is younger than Mike, so Pete started first, and then Mike started a little bit later, because I think he was either getting married or having a honeymoon or something, and he started a little bit later, but so Mike ended up working for Pete. But they were pretty much like, they were the same skills and background and stuff, but yeah, they were both involved in Excel marketing. Phil Florence was our dev manager, and he was kind of someone, I don't remember exactly like whether Jeff, I think, was supposed to report to him, so the idea was that Bill was concerned that we just didn't have experienced managers in the team. And Phil came from, he had a longer career. He was much older than the rest of us, but we didn't get along with him very well. And his style was very like, he did a lot of like schedules, project schedules, and things like that. And we were a little bit more casual, and he actually didn't really click that well with the team, but he unfortunately did have a heart attack. There was actually a Mariners game that he went to with a bunch of the Excel people, and running into the stadium, he's like clutched his chest and he had a heart attack, and so he left the company. Charles Simoni. Charles was still writing code I'm not sure if he wrote code for Microsoft Excel, but he was writing code for Microsoft Word at the time. Well, he also worked on Multiplan, yeah. Well, Bill, I would say he was very key in deciding, to do such a product, and the there was a retreat, I think, held at a hotel next to the Microsoft building where Bill and Mike Slade and Pete Higgins and maybe Doug and Charles, they were all there, and Jeff Harbers were all there to decide to do this product, because Multiplan was not a very strong competitor against Lotus 123, and so Bill was very interested in Excel, and he talked a lot to Doug about his ideas for how to make a very fast recalculation engine, and then so Doug kind of took some of Bill's ideas and tried different versions of them using the Multiplan code, and then that's how he developed the intelligent recalc algorithm that Excel used. So Bill was quite interested and involved in Excel, especially recalc. He didn't write any code. No. So the last code that Bill wrote for Microsoft was for a small computer called the Model 100, which was from Radio Shack. It was a little tiny portable computer, but Bill wrote all the code. It had a spreadsheet, it had a word processor, it had a little database. It was all in a small little machine, and a terminal communication program. It was kind of an incredible little machine, and Bill wrote all of that code. But that was the last. He just got too busy running the company. I met Steve Jobs twice before that. So when I was in high school, I worked in the Apple booth at the Consumer Electronics Show with Steve Jobs and Wozniak and Randy Wigginton. Steve Jobs wasn't really that nice to me. As just like I felt like I was like kind of a high school student, kind of running around underfoot. But I know Wozniak was like a really nice. We would eat lunch together, take our breaks, and then he would explain technical things to me. But Jobs was, he was definitely like very motivated, inspiring person, but sometimes not very nice. I asked Mike Slade about this, and he's got a really good memory for this, and he says, now I'm forgetting his name, but it was someone in the sales force who was working like in Boston or New York, something like that, but he was talking with people, trying to solicit names and ideas for names, and he thinks it came from like someone had their checking account was branded Excel, like Excel checking or something, and so he said, well, how about Excel? And then we had to do like trademark search and make sure the name was available for branding for a software product and things like that. And Mike says that of all the names that were being considered, Excel was just like the easiest one to get the rights to. Yeah, so after Mac Excel shipped, Chris Peters became the manager of our group, our developer team, and he brought a lot of kind of energy and enthusiasm to the team, and so he's the one who kind of came up with the Recalc or Die slogan. We had kind of a rivalry inside Microsoft with the Microsoft Word team, and we used to go. We had a bunch of Super Soaker like water pistols, and we used to go attack their team, and they would attack us, and back and forth. Just kind of a friendly rivalry. But and for Excel 3, we ordered a bunch of these leather jackets, and we were looking for something to put on the back, and so Chris had designed a Harley Davidson like wings, for the leather jacket. And he came up with the slogan, Recalc or Die, and that we embroidered on those jackets. Well, Excel 1 had an Easter egg in it. It was very simple, and John Partridge put it in. So it was, you had to go to IV 16384, go to the last cell of the spreadsheet. And then you hit Command-Shift-G, which was like data find or something. And there in the box where you would type in the name of the cell reference was basically pre-populated with the list of all the developers on it. So that was the first Easter egg, but they got way more complicated. And there was a developer named Wes Cherry who was working on Excel, starting with the Windows version, and he also wrote Solitaire for Windows, very famously. But he was doing all the, I believe he was the main contributor to all the further Easter eggs. I would say Google is just a little bit more engineering driven. The engineers at the company were really much more involved in deciding the direction of the company, as opposed to like a vice president or higher manager kind of telling everybody what to do. So that was a little bit different, but mostly the culture is quite similar. But I enjoyed working at Google, and I found a team to work with, working on a database product for developers called Firebase at Google, which was a great team because they were a recent acquisition, and I really like working with small groups. So. I think there's a connection between music and programming, because a lot of programmers are musicians, and I played the trumpet in high school, but I gave it up until the pandemic, and I started playing trumpet concerts every night for my neighbors. I did 450 of those concerts, all during the COVID pandemic. But the art classes were actually after I retired from Microsoft. My wife and I were thinking about, what could we do together, and she is an artist. And so we found an art school in Seattle that we could both enroll in, and so we spent a couple of years taking classes. Well, here's the thing I learned in art class was that most people think that they can't learn to draw, or they don't have the talent for it, but they also probably haven't spent more than a few minutes trying to draw anything. And so just like any creative work, it's about like your first steps are not going to be that good. But you keep refining, and as long as you can look at it and see what's wrong with it, and then correct it, and then kind of improve on it, you can make it arbitrarily good. So I think art is like that, where the first time I'd spent something like 40 hours working on a drawing, I was amazed at what I was able to create at the end of 40 hours of work on this, and and it's like software. The first version of software is going to not look very good. It's not very polished, or it doesn't have that many features. But you keep incrementally improving, and here we are at Excel after 40 years of improving and adding features. It's like an amazingly powerful tool now. Oh yeah, AI. I've been using AI quite a bit. A little bit for coding. I do some hobby projects and using AI to help me write code very fast, or use new tools that I don't know how to use. And so AI is going to definitely change the way people use computers to get their jobs done, or get other work done, or creative things done. And it's going to be exciting, and maybe a little bit scary for people as maybe their traditional jobs get displaced. So we'll kind of see how that all shakes out. Oh, well, I really like Bulgarian culture, and people have been very friendly here. I liked, my wife and I took a river cruise on the Danube, and so we were kind of on the border between Romania and Bulgaria, but we did take some trips into villages in Bulgaria, and I love seeing like it has such a deep history, here. And we don't hear much about it, I think, in the Western European or American culture, but I really enjoy Blagodaria.
Thank you.